I'm seeing more budgets being cut right now for corporate wellness, which is concerning because I do think that if we've learned anything from the better part of this decade, employee well-being, mental, physical, emotional is so critical, especially for those companies if they want to retain top talent and, be productive and have positive outcomes as a result.
This is All Things Fitness and Wellness, hosted by Krissy Vann. Together, we're uniting industry thought leaders and fitfluencers on the mission to inspire innovation and encourage people to live a life fit and well. On this episode of the ATFW podcast, I'm joined by Reena Vokoun, the founder and CEO of Passion Fit. Reena is an award-winning entrepreneur, corporate wellness consultant, and author. Reena's dedicated her career to helping companies and employees thrive through well-being initiatives that extend far beyond the traditional fitness model. And this conversation couldn't be more timely. A brand new global survey from Wellhub revealed that 73% of operators report increased profitability and 89% see higher member retention through corporate wellness partnerships. It's clear that as employers prioritize well-being, these programs are becoming a critical growth engine for gyms, studios, and digital platforms alike. In this episode, Reena shares her perspective on how fitness and wellness operators can tap into the corporate market, build sustainable revenue streams, and stay ahead of shifting workforce expectations. Before we get started, be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new episodes weekly featuring industry thought leaders and influencers. I'm your host, Krissy Vann, and this is ATFW.
Well, Reena, I am so happy to connect with you. At time of recording, we're in the heart of the summer, which means it's been a couple weeks since we initially crossed paths. We were together in a virtual event for Coach 360. We were talking a lot about marketing and technology that's at the forefront right now in the fitness industry. So I'm so grateful it brought you and I together. And I just want to have mass appreciation to make some time as we're in the final weeks of summer.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Krissy. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Yes, and I'm extra excited because before we hopped on here, we're going to get into the background of your career and how you ended up from the tech space into the fitness industry. But I understand you're going to be adding podcaster to your repertoire as well.
Yes, I am. I'm going to be launching next month my first podcast called Your Power Move by Passion Fit. And Krissy, as you know, you're going to be one of my guests. So I'm so excited to have you on as well and learn more about you and share about you with my audience. So I can't wait. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's such a fun medium. And the thing that I enjoy, it just allows the storytelling to breathe and also offers up a lot of valuable takeaways and nuggets whenever we have a conversation. And I know that's what we're going to gain from you today, because when we talk about your background and companies that you've worked for, GE, Reebok, Yahoo, Google, these are names anyone that is listening is familiar with. So I'm curious, what were you doing in those spaces and how did the corporate world translate to all of a sudden you being CEO, founder of a fitness-driven business?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting path that I've taken. And I get this question often, like, how did you go from here to here? My whole background professionally and academically has been marketing, digital media, advertising, technology, sales, business development, those types of functions. And so I sort of went into my career, especially after completing my education, working for these big Fortune 500 companies as the ones that you mentioned. And I loved my career. And I'm actually, as we were even just talking about with the podcast, I'm still using those skills very much in my company, Passion Fit, today. But I worked for about 16 years in corporate America doing these marketing, digital media, sales, and advertising roles, and really loved my job. It was exciting. When I worked for Google, some of my clients included Fox Sports and Disney and LA Times and Chicago Tribune. So I was working a lot in the entertainment and publishing industries and working on Google advertising products to help people to monetize their content. And it's, again, ironic that I'm now on the other side as the entrepreneur and the brand and the content creator monetizing my content with advertising. But all the while, I've always had a passion for health and wellness and fitness. I started to teach fitness classes for the University of Wisconsin-Madison Athletic Department, starting as a freshman in college. And I fell in love with it. And I've been teaching ever since. And so that's kind of where I, sort of hit this point of burnout during my corporate career after my husband and I, both working in Silicon Valley, had our first child, then we had our second second one. And I think it was after the second one, being a dual career couple with my husband. At this point, we were both at Google, and he to this day still works for Google, and had two young kids. Our older son at the time was a toddler. The little one was a baby. They're now teenagers. But it was just a lot, and traveling, demanding schedule, trying to be a hands-on mom. All of my wellness practices kind of went out the window, right? My fitness, my eating, my sleeping. And mind you, even during my corporate career, I was going to conventions to learn more about nutrition and behavior change and mindfulness just for fun. And so I got a lot of different certifications throughout my corporate career. And at that point of burnout, about 11 years ago, I realized, you know what? I've always wanted to do something to uplift others, to motivate and help others in the areas of health and wellness. And I first need to figure this out for myself because I've lost track of it. But once I get myself on track, I want to be able to create a company and brand to solve for this, because I know I'm not the only one that goes through that burnout, try to balance, work and family. And that's when Passion Fit was born. And I've been doing it ever since. It's been, again, 11 years since I started.
Obviously, and I imagine too, working in Silicon Valley, burnout's something people are very familiar with. But I'm curious, when all of a sudden you realized, I want to put myself behind this and have a business case behind it, were there any things that you learned about burnout in our society, especially when it comes to the corporate world and how employees are feeling these days?
Yeah, I think back then there was definitely burnout. I sort of grew up in the sort of internet world, as you and many other people probably did as well, where the dot-com heyday, the boom, the bust, and all the things that were happening with new startups and technology companies forming. And I think back then, and I do think it still exists today, it was almost like a badge of honor, honestly, with, oh, I worked 80 hours this week. I worked 90. I've been traveling, 70% of the time. And that was something that people thought was, something to be proud of. And I think when I kept seeing not only myself and my husband go through burnout and health issues and stress through all of this, and then seeing a lot of our neighbors and friends and coworkers going through it, I thought this is not healthy. This shouldn't be the norm, and there does need to be more balance. And I think in Silicon Valley, what's kind of interesting, and again, I absolutely loved my job at Google. To this day, I still keep in touch with my old bosses and colleagues. And again, my husband still works there. But I think it can be a bit confusing because those big campuses have a fitness center. They have nap rooms. They have massages available, right? All these amazing benefits. But at the same time, you are expected to work very, very many hours. And oftentimes, you'd be in the office for those long hours. So it's great that you have all of these, wonderful benefits. But if you're working so much, you don't even have the time to take advantage of them. So I think that was definitely the sort of what was happening, the scenario then. I think we did hit a point of companies focusing more on health and well-being of employees during the pandemic. For me, having a corporate wellness program, that's when I had so many companies reaching out to me, saying, can you come and talk to us? Can you consult with us on mental health and physical health? Because all of our employees around the world are now remote, and we need to be able to help people through these uncertain times. But I think now today, as we speed up to 2025, companies are now back mandating people to be in the office, 3 to 4 to even 5 days a week. They're measuring productivity, kind of big brother watching over employees to make sure they're badging in and badging out. And I'm seeing more budgets being cut right now for corporate wellness, which is concerning, because I do think that if we've learned anything from the better part of this decade, employee well-being, mental, physical, emotional, is so critical, especially for those companies if they want to retain top talent and, be productive and have positive outcomes and results. So it's become a little bit tricky.
Yeah, I mean, this would be a subjective response and an opinion that I'd be putting you in the position of, but I'm curious, what are your thoughts as to why we're seeing companies backpedal on corporate wellness? Because I agree, even here in Canada, a couple of years ago, that's what half of them are touting in the top of their LinkedIn line when they were putting a job to apply to.
Yeah, I think what's happened and what's changed is the fact that during the pandemic, definitely in the tech space, especially if they're producing, let's say, hardware products and, even some of the fitness products like the Peloton, right? And the tonal mirror and things like that, they were selling a lot of those technology products in mass quantities because everybody was remote. So we needed to be digitally and virtually connected. They hired on more people because they thought they needed more staff to support this this increase in sales. But then when the world started to go back to normal, everybody was back in person in many cases. And so if they made these high ticket items as a purchase, they probably aren't going to need another one, whether it's a new laptop or a specific kind of phone or workout equipment that they use at home. They may not need to purchase that again for a while. So I think that that really then drove, okay, sales are dropping, revenue is dropping. We've overhired now, so we're going to have to start doing some cost cutting and layoffs. And so when they're looking at all of that, budgets for corporate wellness programs just go right out the window, right? And I do think that a lot of people, there's differing studies. Some will say productivity, and I'm studying this very closely because I do a lot of corporate wellness work, is productivity has gone down for people who are working remotely. They're taking advantage of the system, they're slacking off, right? But I think on the other end of the spectrum, people are saying, well, it is important to have flexibility and to allow employees, especially working parents or people that have pets or elderly, parents to take care of and things like that. They need that flexibility. So again, there's sort of conflicting data that's out there, but I think if we've learned anything, it's that the hybrid approach is probably the best approach because the in-person collaboration and teamwork is important, definitely to help drive company culture, but at the same time, really meeting employees where they are and understanding their individual customized needs is important as well if you want them to be healthy and to produce good results and to be loyal to your company. So I think, there's still a lot of learning that's happening in this arena. I am ever so passionate about it just because I've been through it. And then I'm also on the wellness side. So I can see both ends of it, but I think we need to find a way to still mesh the two together.
Well, and I'm sure a lot of companies exactly that. They're looking how to streamline costs and then can easily say, oh, this is a loss leader. It was just an add-on or an extra. But from what I understand, if you remove these types of things available to employees, and obviously we have a lot of enterprise level operators here that have a huge employee network below them, if they take something like that away, what is the repercussion? Because I would imagine if all of a sudden you have a bunch of burnt out employees, this is an industry that deals with a lot of churn, unfortunately. And I would think it would create more of that.
Absolutely. It definitely will. I think employees are going to feel that, you don't value me. I'm a means to an end and my health and well-being don't matter. And then they may jump ship and go somewhere else. So I think there is going to be a fallout. And I think there are so many ways now to actually measure the effectiveness of employee wellness programs, especially if you have employees across different offices across the country, even if they're going into the office, we're a global economy now, right? And so if you are doing anything virtually or using digital platforms or apps, you can track performance from the perspective of people that are actually participating in different challenges or attending workshops and looking at their engagement, measuring their number of sick days hopefully going down, looking at medical costs going down. So I think that there are a lot of ways now that we can measure the effectiveness so that if you are, in my case, I'm usually pitching to, senior level HR directors and vice presidents. Sometimes you're talking to the CFO if they're the key decision maker because they control the budget. I think it's important to show that, hey, we can measure an ROI on this. We can even get qualitative data by doing employee surveys. So there's so many ways to track its effectiveness, and it's better to have that benefit available to employees than to just take it away, because I think that's only going to result in them going somewhere else.
Yeah. On that note, is there a demographic that you find employee wise that tends to demand, and I use that term lightly, but really wanting that to be a scope of what their employer offers?
Yeah, I definitely think it's people in midlife, right? Where they have families and they're trying to juggle their personal and professional demands on their life. I think, when you are entry level and you're first out of college, I remember those years. I'm sure you do as well. Like you wanted
So
to
many jobs.
so many jobs, right? And it was fun to be in the office and meeting your team and collaborating and going to happy hour afterward and, maybe working out together on the lunch hour in the corporate fitness center. Like like, that's all great, I think, at that stage of life. But I do think it becomes more critical as you are managing multiple things. I know for me personally, when I became a working mom, all of a sudden, okay, school gets out at 2:25 p.m., like very specific times. And oh, I have to take the kids to soccer practice by 3:45 or 4. How am I going to do that in a corporate setting when I have client meetings and team meetings? And, that's where it does become really tricky. And that's where having sort of that flexibility and that remote work can really come into play. And then people that have to commute, right? I think that also adds more hours to their day when they're just trying to pick up their kids from daycare or get home in time to make a healthy dinner for their family. So that's where I've seen it. Definitely the midlife, the working parents is where it's needed most.
Yeah, no doubt. And I imagine I'd be curious to know to see just how much the Gen Z generation starts to demand such things, only because they're so much more cognizant of their wellness and well-being. I mean, we see that in the fitness industry itself in regards to the largest segment that's growing with gym memberships. It's Gen Z that's the driver. And I think they've kind of looked to the generations above them thinking there must have been a better way, probably because they're raised often by parents that have been feeling the stress and the burnout, and they're feeling the effects of that. So when you've created Passion Fit, talk me through exactly what is the business model that you came up with and decided to pursue.
Yeah. So in launching Passion Fit, I knew right off the bat I wanted to focus on both consumer and corporate wellness. I definitely wanted to target women, so professional women, whether they're working mothers or they don't have to necessarily be mothers, but have other responsibilities in their lives. And oftentimes they are putting themselves last and, not taking care of their health and well-being and experiencing that burnout like I did. So I would say that's my target audience, but still in the consumer and the corporate wellness side. And when I am working with organizations, whether it's companies, nonprofits, the media, universities, and schools, I'm reaching everybody. And I always want to be inclusive and make sure that everybody has tools available to them. Also, I wanted to make sure that I had kind of a mix of products, services, and content. So the products include an online work-life balance course. People can sign up for those as part of a larger part of one of my programs, which I'll talk about in a minute, but also as a standalone. And then companies can actually purchase the courses in bulk for their teams and employees as well. I also launched an activewear line. So Passion Fit has an online boutique. So, yoga pants and leggings and tank tops and sports bras and hats and hoodies and all that kind of stuff. And then just healthy lifestyle accessories, yoga mats, water bottles, just to kind of encourage people. I think when you have, those products and that activewear and that sort of overall lifestyle, you're more likely to hopefully stick with it. And then I published 2 books. My first book, called The Wellness Empowered Woman, came out in 2021. And then the follow-up book, because it's part of a women's wellness series, came out in 2024, called The Wellness Evolved Woman. So those are just some examples of the products. And then the services include the corporate wellness program. So that's, having me go out to companies and offer them a wide range of services and tracking and workshops and challenges and things like that. I also have a women's wellness coaching program. So that's my most comprehensive one, which includes wellness as well as personal and professional development coaching. It involves unlimited access to my live stream classes. So I teach all those modalities that I mentioned, both in person as well as over live stream, so people can take the classes from anywhere. And then wellness retreats and, other speaking engagements and workshops and things like that. And then the content includes a YouTube channel. That was one of the first things that I launched 11 years ago with the company, a blog, and now the podcast as well. So it's kind of a wide variety. People can sort of pick and choose what's going to work for them or their organization. But that just really allows me to meet people where they are.
The only thing that's making me smile even more is that we start the conversation of how the business was born, and it was you feeling burnt out, and then hearing the scope of work that you're in charge of. Starting the podcast with the mix. I mean, I know you have a team that supports you as well, but they're probably like, does she sleep? And I'm curious, like, how is your work-life balance when you are creating something of your own as an entrepreneur? Because you clearly prioritized it going into it. Have you been able to keep that a star north?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. And again, one that I get often. They're like, wait a second, doesn't this defeat the purpose of why you left your corporate career in the first place? So I think for me, what was important was to make sure that I controlled my commitments, my time, my schedule, and my energy, right? And my priorities. And I do think that having my own company allows me to do that more so than when I was working for a big company in a client-facing role. So I have the ability and the liberty to say yes and no to different speaking engagements or partnerships or commitments. So I am, able to kind of decide what's going to cross my boundary in terms of work-life balance and what I can handle. I also find it very important to practice what I preach. So for me, being authentic and true to what I am telling my clients to do really matters. So that for me is a non-negotiable because I've been through burnout. So I can recognize the signs of it. Again, I am a type A personality. I'm a recovering perfectionist, as you and I were talking about. I'm a people pleaser. So I know my weaknesses and I know my strengths. So by blocking time in my calendar and making things non-negotiable, my workouts, obviously I get those in every morning because I'm teaching 5 days a week. But my mindfulness practices every morning, meal planning, healthy cooking for my family. I'm very vigilant about my sleep, making sure that I get 7 to 8 hours every night. And, if I do feel like I'm getting stressed and I've taken on too much, then that's where I know that light bulb will go on, like, okay, you're kind of going down that path again, you need to pull back. So I think that that's all important. And when I list off all these things that Passion Fit does, I didn't launch them all at once. So again, I've been in business for 11 years. So I had kind of 1 or 2 at the most major launches each year. So this year in 2025, the big launch is obviously the podcast. And I did actually launch both of my books on audiobook as well. So
incredible.
two major launches this year, but beyond these 2, these are going to be the big things. And so that gives me the ability to kind of, manage things and have some balance because I'm only doing one thing at a time. And then once those things are up and running, it's a matter of just managing them. And yes, I have a wonderful cross-functional team that has supported me since day one.
Well, and I think the biggest thing that you highlight was right off the hop there was to use a little bit of your branding name in there, but you're very passionate about what you're doing and being in charge of your own destiny of what I'm willing to do, what I want to do, what lights me up. And we know even if we're so busy, if it's a project that you're truly buzzing and excited about, your output and your productivity often goes up tenfold because it's using your right brain, left brain, everything coming together in the best way. But another thing that you touched on at the beginning of the conversation was your background in marketing and those avenues. And obviously every single thing that you've launched, especially doing your own brand, would require you to constantly be adapting how you're getting the message out there. And we kind of met in a panel that really addressed a lot of the shifts that are currently happening. AI, I know you can't go to a conference without that being the prime topic of conversation. So I'm just curious, where are you focusing most? Like, for example, you're launching a podcast. There's a lot of people that we see on LinkedIn that are trying to build their personal brands. Where would you be doubling down right now when it comes to promoting a business in the marketing landscape? Because it'll have changed a lot in 11 years.
Definitely. Yeah. And you're right. You have to constantly evolve if you want to stay in business and you want to reach people, right? Because where your audience is going as they evolve and grow and change in their life and their preferences and needs change, you need to be there and again, meet them where they are. So yeah, definitely technology and digital media has always been important, but again, it has evolved and changed over time. So, I have all of my channels, which again, continue to get more sophisticated each year, but the newsletter, all of my social media platforms. So Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Twitter X, Facebook, on LinkedIn as well. And then YouTube, that one I started from the very beginning, but then I've done new things with YouTube, like YouTube Shorts and experimenting with long and short form video, now adding video podcasts to the mix. And that type of thing. And then, obviously AI, looking for efficiencies in my business and making sure that I have the ability to, coach people virtually if I need some support in that. I'm continuing to research how I can build that into the business as well. And then just website updates. I do still think a website is important for a business or a brand, but, now people are going out to social media channels even more so. But I think if you want to have a hub, especially if you have products and services where you're launching out to online courses and different things, it's important to have it. Substack is becoming really important. I haven't launched into that yet, but it's something that I've been researching more and more.
It's interesting you bring that up. I just, like, for a completely personal that maybe will become a professional project at some point, but I just started on Substack. And
How do you
it was
like
interesting to me. I enjoy it, obviously, in the learning curve stage. I've been looking at a lot of, obviously, there's some very renowned authors on there, so you can kind of see what they're doing. There's so many different flavors. It's one of those platforms I wish that I had arrived in its infancy, because you can see its organic quality is already, you're almost looking to escape to social platforms that aren't heavily saturated and still have the social feel of yesteryear.
Yeah.
But I mean, I love long form content and I love things that breathe. So platforms that allow for that. And I think we have a bigger yearning for that more than ever. It
Mhm.
is difficult to decipher, and more becoming difficult to decipher, though, what's up there that's purely AI generated or still has the mind's eye of a human.
Yes, I feel like that's the most. We shouldn't fear it. I think a lot of people have that concerns, and I even share that as well. But I always remember when I do have that fear or that worry, if we go back to search, right? That's when I started my career in right the late '90s, early 2000s. Not to date myself here, but we were fearful of search back then.
Right.
So I think anything that's new and innovative is always going to be scary at first, especially if it is taking away jobs and it's affecting, how people are presenting themselves and if it is the true person or not. But I think in, our line of work with media and communications and health and wellness and fitness, I do think that people still want that human interaction
Mhm.
behind it. Right. You want to feel like it's a real person. So hopefully we can find that balance. But yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear your thoughts and your experiences with, long form content. And I can totally understand why that's your preference, also coming from a broadcast and media background.
Totally.
So yeah, it's really fascinating. But I think rather than fear it, the more we can educate ourselves and learn and grow with it, the better off we're going to be, because it's not going
For
anywhere.
sure. Oh, and honestly, I'm grateful that it's not, because at this point, it's an added exponents to my being in so many different wheelhouses. Or, we try and be Swiss Army knives of a worker in our work lives, but it really is a great way to supplement with tools where maybe you have a weakness, whereas before you might have had to outsource to somebody else or send this project off. It's a lot easier to learn and upskill, ironically. But
Yeah.
again, we have to be cognizant of how we're doing it, because it's not always accurate and all the rest of it. But there's a lot of really fun tools, even as a content creator. The amount of productivity in regards to output you're able to have is exponential. You
Yeah.
have made that shift, though, 11 years ago, corporate to pure entrepreneurship. So what have been some of the biggest learnings along the way? Because there's one thing to have a vision, and one of my favorite things is the dream is free, the hustle sold separately. And within that hustle, there's often some big, whoa, didn't see that coming moments.
Yeah, I think, there've definitely been plenty. Obviously, as you know as well, being an entrepreneur it's challenging. It's the most challenging thing I've ever done in my career, but yet it's the most rewarding. And to me, I think if you go into it knowing that you're doing something that's going to improve the lives of others and help other people and uplift them, or whatever, you're doing, creating a solution to solve a problem in the market, I think that is really important. So for me, it's just continuing to understand my client and my customer base. And that's it definitely came from my years working in corporate. The customer is always first, right? And I think that's something that's really important. And taking surveys and getting feedback and asking for ratings and reviews and all those types of things, because we're only as good as what our customer sees in us. And you always, if you are in a service-based business, which many of us in the health and wellness and fitness industry are, you always want to be taking that pulse of what are the challenges that your clients are facing. And some of it, I think, I have faced myself. I always try to put myself in the shoes of my client and try to relate to them, and again, meet them where they are and listen to what they're struggling with so that I can continue to build solutions. I think another thing I've learned is just the legalities, right? I think I did business development and sales negotiations and partnership deals for so many years of my career that I'm so thankful that I had that, because
Right.
then when it came to doing partnerships or, corporate wellness contracts and things like that, I do have a legal counsel and a lawyer that she's been with me since day one, but just really understanding the fine print, because when you are out on your own, the buck stops with you. So you want to make sure that you are in compliance, you're doing everything correctly. Another thing I learned was when I worked at Google, I worked very closely with the YouTube team. And so in launching my own YouTube channel and becoming a YouTube partner, I was already pretty aware of the importance of copyright, right, for music,
Yep.
and making sure you have especially in our industry in health and fitness, the ASCAP licenses and other appropriate licenses for original music. And that's even changed since I started 11 years ago, right? Because all the social media platforms have their own licensing deals. So for, stories and reels and things, you can use music, but where places where you can and you can't. And YouTube is still pretty strict, and I don't ever want to cross the line there. So I'm so
Yeah, it's a big X,
careful.
and they don't give you money to stack up before you're out.
Yeah. So that for anybody out there that is an entrepreneur and you're doing any sort of video content, especially on YouTube, you want to be really careful with licenses and copyright laws and things like that, because a couple strikes and then you lose your whole channel. And I know that that's a big marketing engine for a lot of businesses and brands. And I think, just always striving for excellence and just not giving up. I think that's another important one. You can, change course. It's not saying that you have to sort of just keep sticking with the same thing that's not working, but, you might need to evolve and iterate and change. But if the main mission and the main business idea is something that's important to you and you see that there's a need for it, keep going and ask for help and figure out ways that you can change strategy so that you can really continue on your path if that's what you want to do. And I would say the last thing I've learned is, there's sort of two schools of thought about picking one thing and really succeeding at that first. I think of like the Nike running shoe, right? Or Google with search and Starbucks with coffee. And people will say, just pick that one thing, own the market and make that be the thing you're known for. And then you can add from there. And I do see the merit in that. But I also think it's important to honor the fact that you may want to have a multifaceted business. And I definitely fall a bit into that camp of it's okay to have multiple products and services as long as they're cohesive and there is sort of at least one standout thing that you focus on and everything else kind of falls around that. And as I was mentioning earlier, I would launch one thing at a time so that you can really do it well, master it, get feedback, and keep, as I was mentioning to you earlier, launching and iterating, which is something that I learned at Google, to make it better and better before you launch the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah, for context, we were chatting before the podcast started because it's exactly that. We were speaking to the podcast that you're starting up and both recovering perfectionists. So I related to you very much that anytime, especially if it's creative work you're passionate about, it can be so easy to just keep holding on to it until it's ready and it's good enough. And that is perfectionist language where at some point you have to just take the bet on yourself, have enough confidence within your own skill set. There is a reason why you are doing what you're doing. If there's not a reason, it's probably not the thing for you. You should definitely be tied to a mission or that spark, but then you have to ship the work. And sometimes that can feel like the hardest thing. And especially sometimes if you're taking leaps of faith in life, I mean, it sounds like you had a supportive partner to create this transition in your life, but anytime we're making big changes, there's often a lot of naysayers. And at the end of the day, you just need to ship the work. You can refine as you go. And then you're making those improvements along the way. Before you know it, you'll be exactly in your mind's eye of where you wanted to be or better. And it might not look exactly how you thought. And that's the beauty of it. It's whatever the vision is, throw it out there and refine. And before you know it, you've sculpted something that at least is a reflection of you.
Absolutely, because ultimately everything is going to change eventually anyway, right? If you launch a product or a service, even if you launched it in its most perfect, wonderful state, it's going to have to change because technology changes, your customers are going to change, right? Preferences are going to change. So I think you bring up a really good point to just get it out there because you're going to have to evolve it anyway. And yes, there could be naysayers. There's always going to be. I was really lucky. My husband was super supportive, still is to this day. My family, my employers, even at Google, they said, go do this because we really see how passionate you are about it. If it doesn't work out, you can always come back.
Amazing.
And so having, that support did mean a lot. But at the end of the day, even if you don't have the support in all the places that you would hope to have it, you do kind of have to stand on your own 2 feet and have that conviction and that belief within yourself. Because if we as entrepreneurs don't believe in ourselves, who is going to believe in us? Right. So it really starts from within. And yes, having a supportive network helps. Naysayers are it's like the name of the game. It's part of the process. But I think if you just really stay true with good intentions, I always remind myself when I'm getting frustrated or stuck, or I feel like, oh, what am I doing? I always remind myself, what is my mission? It's to empower women to flourish personally and professionally through wellness. It's always been since day one. I'm out here to help people. So as long as I keep that in mind, everything else will work out and will fall into place.
Without question. Well, obviously, Reena, you know that we speak to a lot of operators in the fitness industry. So on the B2B side, what would you tell them to prioritize for growth as they're looking ahead to the next 3 to 5 years? And I know no one has a crystal ball, but just from where you're standing, what would you impart?
Yeah, I think, we kind of already talked about one of them, which is AI. I think if you're not already figuring out ways to integrate AI into your business, whether you own a gym or a studio, or you're a trainer or a coach or own some other type of fitness brand, definitely figure out how you can use that, whether it's on the back end to create efficiencies in your business, whether it is to, help you with virtual coaching and other ways to reach your client, as long as there is some sort of human interaction as well, because I do think that that is still a preference. That's important. Obviously, keep up with industry trends. GLP-1s have become, very, very much talked about, and something that a lot of people are curious about or are trying or are taking. And so how does that fit into your work as a coach? How are you educating your customer base, and is that something you incorporate into your membership base in terms of education if you're a gym or studio? Because usually trainers are talking about weight loss with their clients. So make sure you're understanding that and even partnering with other healthcare providers so that you can do your job most effectively. I think there's been a lot of talk about recovery more and more, which I think is great and really important. So if you are a gym or studio, do you have the appropriate recovery tools within your gym? I know I teach for Crunch Fitness down here in San Diego, and they have amazing saunas and massage chairs and red light therapy and all these different things. So if your establishment doesn't have some of those more up and coming innovative recovery tools, and you may lose memberships. So make sure you're on the cutting edge of that. And I think, it started before the pandemic, but I think it became more talked about during and after the pandemic, and that's mental health and really holistic health. I think that is more and more critical. I think we all are understanding. And when I started Passion Fit, I was always holistic: nutrition, fitness, mindfulness, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health. How does it all interact? Because it all does. So if you are providing, health and wellness and fitness services or products, make sure you're thinking about the whole picture, not just the physical side, which I think, back 20, 30 years ago, fitness was more about just the physicality of it all and more about the aesthetics. And I think, as you even mentioned with Gen Z, they're smart, they're educated, and they have access to information, and they recognize how important the mental and the physical health components are and how they go together. So just make sure that you have that lens when you're, building and creating for your health and fitness business.
Such good advice, especially that last point. I think we're getting to the point that if you don't have some form of those offerings available for your clientele, unfortunately, they'll head one block down and go find it. And we are seeing, even in the HVLP gym space, a lot of operators investing to add those extras, because I think very quickly it won't be a nice to have. It will be a, I need this from your consumer. And that's happening in real rapid time. And truly, social media is the engine that's driving that at a rapid pace. So he can't really delay on that one. Reena, I'm so pleased that you were able to join me today. I'm curious, as we look ahead to the future of fitness, what excites you most? Where do you feel that we're heading?
I think what excites me most is the longevity of it all, and hoping that we can convince in our industry more and more people to make this a long-term thing and a part of their lifestyle. It's been a part of mine my entire adult life, and I see the benefits, having gone through various changes in my career as a mother, as a wife, as a friend. I think it's what, for me personally keeps me going in terms of my mental health, my physical health, my energy levels, my perspective. So I understand and have always understood, even as a young adult, how important fitness and wellness is. So I just hope that the industry continues to grow and we can continue to reach more and more people to help them lead healthier, happier, more productive lives, and also get that longevity in so that they can really increase their lifespan and their health span, and continue to stay active year after year, decade after decade.
I think that's one of my favorite things about this space is I have failed to interview one thought leader in this industry that still isn't tied to that understanding of how it bleeds into every facet of our lives in the best way. And I truly think that's why we see such positivity extend from this industry, because it's such a pure intention, because we're all doing it for ourselves at the forefront, and you want others to experience what we experience and elevate themselves in that capacity. Reena, how do people get in touch with you, or if they want to learn more about Passion Fit, and especially if they want to make sure they don't miss when the podcast drops happen?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would say go to the website, passionfit.com. That is the main hub. But if you want to also check us out on social media, at PassionFit LLC, all one word, is the social media handles across everything from Instagram to YouTube to Facebook to TikTok and all the rest. And the podcast is going to be available in video formats and audio formats. So it'll be on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And the exact drop date is still coming, but it will be next month in September. So I will absolutely keep you posted. You can also subscribe to the free Passion Fit newsletter right off the website to be kept up with the latest and greatest. But
brilliant. We'll make sure all of that is in the show notes in case you're currently running your heart out on a treadmill and didn't have a chance to write it down. Reena, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure to reconnect with you.
Likewise, Krissy, I feel like we could talk all day about these amazing topics. I really enjoyed it. And thank you so much for having me. And I can't wait to continue our conversation on my podcast with you very soon.
Countdown's on.
You've just listened to the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast, hosted by Krissy Vann. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry insiders and influencers. Together, we're on a mission for everyone to live a life fit and well.